Okay, good morning. My name's Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana. It's a Saturday morning, and today's topic, we're going to do a show and tell and explanations on growing the California natives. So we started growing these only about, well, most of them about 4 or 5 years ago. Even though we've been growing other plants for a long time, we were always scared of the California natives because we've been told so many times, and we've seen so many of the natives rotting in our pots at our store that we got from other growers. We thought, boy, must be a difficult plant to get in, to grow in a container. But once we started growing them, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of them, we found that they don't die. They're real easy to grow, very easy. So the explanations we've been giving, or the instructions we've been giving on a lot of the natives, is plant them in the fall as the weather's cooling off and the soil's still warm, because you want to have them established before the next summer when they needed more water. But if you watered them in the summer, they would rot, which sounds kind of, it doesn't make any sense, but that's what was happening, is that they were rotting in the summer and they were just blaming people watering them too much. Well, the main problem is that most natives are grown in containers in a mixture that includes a lot of bark or wood. So essentially in compost. And compost can create conditions that cause root rot. And the fact that they are something that died, so they are decomposing anyway, or they have decomposed before they even put the plants in there. So they contain organisms that cause decomposition and or root rot. Plus, as they decompose, they use up the oxygen, create carbon dioxide, create conditions of low oxygen that promote root rot. And it turns out that with compost, the warmer it is when it's moist, the faster these things go on. So in general, compost causes more problems in the summertime when the soil is warmer than it does in the winter when the soil is cold. So we see more root rot in the summer, mainly due to the compost that is around the plant's roots. So if you don't have them in compost, they shouldn't rot. Because generally, water itself, clean water, has sufficient oxygen for the roots of the plants. Water out of the tap generally has sufficient oxygen to keep the roots of these plants alive, even if they're underwater. It's just when you have compost in the soil with the water, the oxygen level's too low, and the roots actually suffocate and start rotting. So that's what we think is going on, what we imagine is going on. About 5 years ago, I had seen an article written by Dr. Matteo Garbolito from UC, University of California, Berkeley, trying to explain why the restoration projects along the California highways were failing. They put in the native plants along California highways and they're all rotting away. And in his article, he and his researchers said the plants we're getting from the nurseries to replant the highways already had root rot when we received them. So they're just rotting in the field. So I emailed him and I said, well, I would assume it's because they're growing them in recycled dead plants. And he says, I concur. They shouldn't be using dead plants. So the only nursery we know now, this thing about using ground up dead trees as soil started probably in the 50s when they were trying to make dirt lighter. Because the actual perfect soil is quartz, mostly quartz, sand, silt, and clay, and it's very heavy, so they wanted to make it lighter. The original recipe that they gave us was half sand, half peat. Peat is a plant that did die, but it died a long time ago. There's no diseases associated with peat because it's been dead too long, been sitting in a lake bottom too long. So But peat has always been expensive, so the nurserymen asked for something cheaper, and they said, well, a third sand, a third bark, and a third peat. And then after about 20 years, they found out pure bark grows plants much quicker than the other mixes with sand and peat moss in them, because when a plant's young in a container, this has great airflow when it's fresh, and it holds just a little bit of water, but enough for the little plant. And as the plant grows, this stuff starts breaking down, holding more water, but the plant's using it fast, so it keeps the air coming in. But within 8 months, this stuff looks like black sludge, and eventually kills the roots. So that's the problem with organic matter. We are one of the few nurseries who have found this out and know what the problem is. Only one other nursery I know of that grows natives. Well, that nursery, and I better put down their name because it's good for them. Las Politas in well, they're near the Bay Area. And on the website, I read once, why don't nurseries plant plants in real dirt? Why do they keep growing them in something other than dirt? So they seem to know what's going on. No, we don't grow them in real dirt. We grow them in stuff that just doesn't have any ground up wood in it. Anything that recently died. So we use the soil that we created is pumice, perlite, sand, which are all quartz, which is the same thing as soil but lighter. And then we have peat moss in here and some charcoal. So that's what we're growing our plants in. We don't see any rot going on anything that we start from small plants. Now, I used to grow a lot of plants myself from cuttings and seeds. I don't do quite as much as I used to when I was younger. So a lot of these plants now we get from growers who do the cuttings for us, but they do it in peat and perlite. They don't use compost. Very few propagators use bark. We've found a few, and their plants tend to rot out. Even with that much bark around the roots on some lavenders, we were getting root rot. So it didn't take much to cause that. Whereas we get lavenders and other sensitive plants from the proper propagators with peat and perlite, they never rot. So, okay. So the main thing is get the plants in the correct soil, and then there's no reason, like we grow these things year round. Middle of summer, 100 degrees out, we're watering twice a day. We don't see anything rot. Yes. Okay, the question was, do they require alkaline soil? The certain plants grow up in certain areas of California where the soil may be alkaline. There are certainly areas where it's acidic also. So it depends on the plant. Okay. Right. So the question was, do I worry about the pH of the soil? So actually, UC Davis went around, some researchers from UC Davis went around the Central Valley 20, 30 years ago and did a survey on how the native plants were growing in the native soils they had. And they said it didn't seem to matter what the soil was like. They saw the same plants across the Central Valley in all kinds of different soils, acidic, alkaline, high in this, clayish, sandy. They said the plants weren't really no, they didn't do all the plants. They were doing just certain natives. Excuse me. And their conclusion was that the plants were not actually getting anything from the soil themselves. They were getting nutrition from a pile of dead leaves sitting underneath them. They said they just recycled the plants they were surveying, just recycled the nutrients from the dead leaves piling underneath them. If they had that, they were fine. The soil, what the soil was like, didn't matter. So if you use organic fertilizers or just use compost as the nutrient source, a lot of these plants don't care about soil quality. Now, I'm sure there's some that need it highly acidic, and some that like it more alkaline. The pH of our soil is probably around 6, slightly acidic, which most plants prefer, but right. So we just grow everything in the same soil, and we seem to have just good results in that. Our two soils, top pot and acid mix. Top pot has less peat moss. That's about it. So the acid mix, we have 50% peat, and peat moss is not a permanent material. So, and it does settle more than the materials we have in the top pot. So with the acid mix over time, it does shrink 10-20% because it's 50% peat. Whereas our top pot, lower amount of peat, 35% peat, we don't seem to get any shrinkage in the soils. So apparently the peat moss in top pot's not adding to the volume. Yes.
That's the bark.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using, well, this started this year. That's the bark and laid it on top of it. Is that wrong to do?
No.
Okay.
So any type of compost, including bark, is fine on top of the ground.
Okay.
Now, when you think about it, this ground up bark is not very natural, because trees don't, when they die, they don't suddenly grind themselves up into a million pieces. So there's not a whole lot of bark on the ground in nature. Right. Yeah. So, you know, most of the stuff on top of the ground in nature is dead leaves rather than bark, but bark is fine. Anything dead on top of the ground, it seems to be fine, as long as it's not too fine textured and too deep. So, okay, so the natives, well, the coarser the material, the deeper it can be. In most forests, so the average across the world is 5 inches of dead leaves on top of the ground where plants grow. Some of the orchards up north said they're using 1.5 foot in their orchards. I mean, underneath some of the oak trees in the Sierra, they get several feet deep. And someone told me that underneath avocado trees in Guatemala, wild avocado trees, they found to be 5 foot deep. I can't confirm that, but that's what they told me. A friend of mine told me that they wanted to see how far down the dirt was, and they said they dug through 5 foot of dead leaves. So, okay, some of the natives that we grow. This is one of the more difficult ones because I can't get good liners. So manzanita, which is botanical name is Arctostaphylos, one of the most handsome natives we have. You know, they'll grow, if you give this plant about 20 years, it'll be about this tall with nice red, smooth stems and bark, white flowers, little berries, absolutely gorgeous native plant. We don't have you know, we might have to start doing this from cuttings ourselves because I can't find young plants in perfect soil. We get these in 1 gallons in the ground up wood stuff, and we lose a lot of them when we make the transition. They don't repair that well. So when we take off the ground up bark and put them into our top pot, there is a loss factor. And this year it was extra heavy. I like, you know, even when we buy them in 1 gallon containers, I like to buy real young plants that don't have too many roots. So when you take the ground up wood off, you're not messing with the roots as badly, but sometimes I just can't find them. And so we did a group of 6 of these and only 3 of them made it. So, and we're still worried about some of these, what happens to them in the future if they've got some root rot going on right now from that messing with the roots. So, anyway, manzanitas, there's low-growing ones, which we've grown in the past. We can get the little baby plants for the low-growing ones, but no one seems to be interested in those. We end up throwing them all away. So people want the tree ones, which I can't find aligners for. I found one supplier that does them, but they won't sell to us. They're overbooked. They've got too many people wanting them, so they can't do it for us. So we'll have to start trying to get cuttings of those ourselves. But we also know that manzanitas need a special fungus in the ground to help them recycle nutrients, a special mycorrhizal fungus that's only found on manzanitas. So if you really want to do a good job with manzanitas and not use chemical fertilizers, you've got to go up to where they're growing. I don't know that the growers inoculated these with the right fungus, but you have to go to some of the hills or mountains nearby and find a manzanita and just grab some dirt from underneath that thing and then throw it around yours to get that proper fungus around them so that they can live off of dead leaves. So this is Howard McMinn, which is a good all-purpose manzanita. It can be used as a bush or a tree. But we tend to go with the bigger ones. Dr. Hurd is another one we're growing at the moment. I only got one to survive out of 5. So we're not doing real well with manzanitas this year. This is the native redbud. Now, they don't like containers very much. So in containers, over the years, we've grown these for the last 10 years, at least, in pots. And they'll just kind of sit there and not do much. This might get another foot high in this pot. This doesn't look much like a tree. We find once you get these in the ground, like sometimes a plant in a pot will root into the ground, and suddenly it just takes off and grows 5 feet a year. So they like to be in the ground. Now, the main difference between pots and ground is that the soil in a pot can overheat in the summer. So that's probably what's going on. The roots of these plants, once you get this time of year, the black plastic gets so hot in there that the root system just isn't as healthy as it would be once it gets into the dirt of the ground that stays cooler. And then they just shoot and get going. So the local, now these aren't native to Orange County, but they are native to most of the mountains of California. The Western redbud is one of the smaller redbuds, so it's nice because it doesn't outgrow its spot. 10 to 15 foot high and wide, kind of a nice umbrella shape. It might take 3 or 4 years to make it look like a tree. In other words, get the branching high enough. 2 years, 3 years. So you can walk underneath it. And these are deciduous. They've got this color leaf until December. They turn yellow and drop off. And then around March each year, they look like neon lights of pink going along the stems. They're real small flowers in tight clusters packed along each stem where the leaves are attached. So the whole thing glows kind of pink in March, and then the leaves come back on in April. Okay, one of the interesting plants that we can grow here is plants that are native to the higher mountains, but this is incense cedar. So if you go to Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear, these things are huge. They're shaped like that when they're young. They look like something that somebody planted because they're real full, emerald green. They really stand out in nature. They're slow growing at first. The botanical name for this is Calocedrus. No. Yeah. Yellow cedrus. They're native all up and down the west coast, down into Mexico. They can live at sea level, which is interesting. So they don't need the cold, the real intense cold in the mountains in the winter to do well. They'll do well here. The other interesting thing about them is, and it's also known as Western red cedar, is the wood is very flexible. Very flexible. And they said, for generations, this is the wood that they make pencils out of, because it's not so brittle. You can sharpen it without it just, without it shattering.
How much water do you get?
Well, it's quite drought tolerant, but they can handle water.
How drought tolerant are they?
Pretty well. I think the book says once a month is all you would need in the summer. I mean, the mountains, they get those showers now and then.
I'm talking about the ocean, where there is no water.
Don't know. Yeah, that I couldn't tell you. They said. This one doesn't, but I think when you walk by them up in the mountains, they have a good fragrance. Incense cedar. I haven't checked it for that. Okay, here's a couple of native cypresses. Cypressus cupressus. There are cypresses found all over around the world. This is a selection of the Monterey cypress, Cupressus macrocarpa. So that's the Monterey. And this one has a yellow tinge to it. It's called Wilma Goldcrest. This one does have, I did earlier in the year, a decent fragrance coming off. And it's interesting, a lot of the lime-colored leaf foliage Monterey cypresses have a lemony smell to them. This one is fairly small growing. The regular Monterey cypress wants to be 30 by 30 in a hurry. Now, Monterey cypress has trouble under drought conditions. By the coast, it's fine. Orange County, they may be okay too, but if they're under drought stress and it's 190 degrees out and you don't water them enough, they get this disease. It's a bacterial canker infection they get under drought conditions. So we've had other cypresses in the past all perish, including Monterey cypress, during drought years. But we notice that when one's in a lawn, it's healthy. If you can keep the lawn green, the cypress there is healthy too. But if you've got this in a dry bank and it's under drought stress and it's warm, then they catch this disease that slowly kills them. So this other cypress from Arizona, no problem with the drought. So it's a California native too, Cupressus arizonica. They're native eastern California through Arizona, through, I think, New Mexico into Mexico. So this is a bluer selection of that group. Now, there is a cypress native to Orange County, and I think we carried it one time, the Tecate cypress, which is native to a canyon along the riverbed up here, the Santa Ana River. Tecate cypress. But I haven't had a source of that lately.
How tall does it get?
This one, 30, 40. It grows 10 to 15. So it's not as narrow as Italian, but it's still fairly conical shaped. So a good screening plant. Well, not like Italian cypress, 80 foot by 5 foot. So, okay, so that's no, it gets dense. Because what it does, what a lot of cypresses do is they'll start sending up a lot of branches straight up, so it fills in. Okay, we mentioned this a few weeks ago. This is desert willow, Chalopsis. This is Chalopsis bubba, a selection made in Texas that has a bigger, brighter flower and less seed production. So it spends more time blooming and less time making seeds. If you put this near another variety of desert willow, then it starts making a lot of seed, and the seed pods look like shoelaces hanging down. It looks a little messy. But by itself, it doesn't make many seed pods at all, and it just keeps on blooming. So we'll get almost constant bloom from April, say May through November. Then it goes to sleep in the winter and drops all its leaves. So it looks dead until April, and then once it leaves out, it grows 6 inches and starts blooming again. These are actually related to jacaranda trees. These will grow 20 to 30 max and not quite as wide. So they're not bad for small side yards. They don't get huge. Okay, plants that we had the most trouble with before we started growing them were the ceanothus. So if we bought these from our growers, we would try not to have them in stock this time of year because they'd all be turning yellow and rotting away. Then when we started growing them, we found they don't change. They just grow real fast, stay green, look great, bloom in the spring with the blue flowers. This is Dark Star, which has got a real deep blue flower. Now, there's a lot of different ceanothus, and we've carried, one year we grew Ray Hartman, which goes straight up about 10, 15 foot. Nobody seemed to want that one, so we quit. We had to throw most of those away. Most people want the ones that cover a lot of ground, stay fairly low. Dark Star does get up to about 5 feet high, although you can probably keep it right around 3, and it does spread out 8 or 10 foot across or more. And it does it fast. I mean, we got these in when they were this big, maybe 3 months ago. And they just take off. They really haul. Here's a lower one called Anchor Bay. Now, it sounds like it should be near the ocean, but they've already determined this can grow inland near Sacramento also, no problem. So, ceanothus Anchor Bay. And that one stays lower. Uh, 2 to 3 foot. And the other one's Dark Star. Well, once they get established, they're fine. I mean, the thing about natives that we had heard is that they take, for a native plant to get established in California naturally, 2 or 3 years of heavy rainfall, unusually heavy, or else they don't get started. So it does take them quite a bit of water to get going. It's interesting, there was an article back in the 80s, research project going on, because none of the researchers at UC Davis can remember ever seeing a young valley oak. They said the valley oaks are going extinct. We haven't seen a baby valley oak in all the time we've been doing research on them. And then suddenly we had the El Ninos of 94, 95, 96, 98, 3 out of 4 years, 20 plus inches of rain, 3 out of 4 years. And then they made a note, okay, we're quitting the project now. The entire Central Valley is full of baby belly oaks. They just need those El Ninos to come through more than 1 year at a time. And suddenly all the oaks start taking off and get going. So that was, so they said apparently the last time that happened was 70 years ago. So they thought they're going extinct. And suddenly here in the mid 90s, a whole new generation starts. So for most California natives, that may be the case. They need extra water to get them established. Once they get the roots nice and long and deep, then they're on their own. But they need water to get started. You can't, when, they stopped promoting during the 7-year drought we had 2012 to 2017. They stopped trying to promote California natives because everybody lost them because we couldn't water. You put the native in the ground, you don't water it, it can't make it. It's got to have water to get established. It's got to have those wet ears to get going. And if you don't have the water, so they switched to different plants rather than the California native. Anyway, one of the newer and smallest of the ceanothus is this one called Centennial, which only grows 1 to 2 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. So a smaller plant more for a regular garden, not the hillside or something. These are a little bit young yet. We're not selling them quite yet. They need a few more weeks. Actually, I have some in smaller pots in our native section. Same size and 4-inch. Medium blue. They're blue flowers. Yeah. Not as wide as the ground cover types. So these can grow over 8 foot, 10 foot. Whereas that one's only supposed to be 2 foot, 3 foot. So much smaller version. We just started up some Yankee Points, which is another popular one, but they won't be ready for at least a month. So Yankee Point, 3 to 5 foot tall, 10 foot wide or more. Nice dark blue flowers on that one. This year was kind of tough. The last couple of years, it's been so cool early in the year, we haven't been able to get the plants from our suppliers because they just wouldn't grow when it's really cool out. Okay, we got the Dudleas, which are often called live-forevers. And these are native succulents throughout a lot of California and Baja. So Monterey Bay, I don't know if they have a contract going with a local propagator whose goal was it, because these are being taken out of the natural places because of their cost and uniqueness. They're trying to grow as many seedlings of these as they can to bring the price down so that people won't go and steal them out of their native spots. Now, when I see these growing, they're never in a hot spot. You think succulents hot spots, but in the local mountains here, they're always seem to be on the north side. North side, east side, maybe even the west side, but you don't see any of these on the south sides of hills. And they're often on cliffs. The book says they can't handle much water, but we don't think that's the case. We think if they're in real dirt, they can handle water, just not. So this grower uses ground up wood in their mix. So we would tell you to gently wash off the soil on this one and put it in native soil or in our potting soil if you want to grow it without it rotting so easily. Plus, Dudleas are also very brittle. You just if you bent this leaf all the way down, it would just snap off. It is brittle. Now, we found a supplier You can buy these if you want, but they're not ready to transplant yet, of the Dudleya bretoniis, which are seem to be everyone's favorite, the giant chalk plant. So this gets nice wide, it's called chalk. Broad leaves as it grows older, with a nice white cast to them, very silvery white, or silvery, well, silvery. Also extremely brittle, so be careful if you handle them. And I would tell you, underneath the shade of a tree or east side, north side, it's probably better for those. So these are seedlings, which may not belong to any specific species of Dudleya. They may be hybrids. Okay, then we have Epilobium, which used to be called I don't know how to spell that, Zauschneria. There's a C in there somewhere. Anyway, the island, was it island snapdragon? So they come in different forms. This one is labeled Sierra Salmon, but I think this actually might be Everett's Choice. I think I lost the label to the plants, but they're one of the few natives that blooms primarily in fall. So late summer, fall. This one will probably stay about a foot or so by about 2 or 3 foot across. Hummingbirds love it. It's one of the few fall blooming plants that we sell. Most books say to keep it neat, cut it back after it blooms in the fall, because they don't look so pretty in the fall. And of course, if you keep watering, it might stay looking pretty good. So that's Epilobium. Now this one I haven't grown before, so that we got this from a grower. This is Fremontodendron. Which we got the common name. Fremontodendron is the flannel bush. And these things are one of the biggest blooming shrubs native to California. So most of these can grow 10 to 20 foot. They're evergreen with these nice, the leaves get a little bigger, and then they have these large yellow flowers, fuzzy flowers that cover the plant every spring. I haven't really tried to propagate these myself, and they've been difficult. So, I wouldn't guarantee that you can succeed with this plant. I haven't met many people who have, and most of the literature says not many people have either. So they tend to be difficult to keep alive. Now, again, it might be because the growers grow them in compost. I tried switching some to our soil a couple decades ago and lost all of them, but then I haven't tried it lately. So I'll probably have to try it again and see if we can get these to grow easily in our soil. So.
With the fungus already, should we fix the roots in our place?
I don't know if that might kill them. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we don't know much about. I mean, they often say, when you take cuttings, dip them in bleach, but roots are much more delicate. So they're not covered with wax like leaves are, so not certain. Okay, here's the native toyon. Now, toyon happens to be one plant that in compost they usually make it, but we just wanted to start a crop ourselves. So toyon is heteromeles. They make red berries in the fall. This is a plant that gave Hollywood its name because they look like big holly bushes. They have slightly serrated leaves with red berries in the winter time. So that's the Hollywood plant. So they'll grow 10 foot, 15 foot tall, pretty wide. Could be made as a specimen tree. They bloom and then they have the red berries. There's one variety that has yellow berries that's being sold also. Fairly fast growers. They sometimes get fire blight with the flowers. You have to watch that. But otherwise, fairly easy. We just wanted to see how they looked when we grew them. And so far, so good. This isn't ready to sell yet. We want to get it about a foot and a half before we sell them. Okay, this is red buckwheat. Areogonum. Now, buckwheat is a big family of plants, and there's a lot of native buckwheats that are being sold. This one's got the red flowers, my favorite of them. There is one that's called Shasta Yellow with bright yellow flowers. I'm not certain that one's supposed to grow in Southern California or not. This one grows really well in one of my employees' gardens. They didn't grow this one. We got this from a grower. We have a few around that were grown in our top pot. And she says they multiply nicely. They make a good perennial bush that stays low. I would put them in a spot that gets both. I'm sure, there are native buckwheats that are native throughout Orange County that live on just exposed dirt, but they're not as pretty as this one. This one's more from northern or central California, so I'm not sure how much sun they like, but all the books you see pictures of them, they're underneath trees. But they probably can take full sun. But a lot of the native ones in Orange County just have a cream colored flower. They don't have a red flower, this cream colored. There's some native to the islands that grow this tall. And have a nice airy flower, even though it's not all that nice a color, but it's a very airy flower. This one stays low. That's about as big as they get. They just spread and multiply. Pardon? Probably close to perfect. It says good for clay soil, full sun, 2 foot tall, drought tolerant, flowers in summer. 2 foot tall, 2 to 3 foot wide, 2 to 3 foot, but they do reseed. We just started a new crop of Galvesia. And this is known as being the easiest native to grow, unless you get it in compost and they all rot. But this one here grows very quickly to about 2 by 4. Bright red flowers, kind of scarlet red flowers. They can bloom most of the year. One of my friends was growing some oak trees, and I suggested that he put this around them. He just ordered 24 of these because it says they've been doing spectacularly underneath his oak trees. This doesn't water them. Well, it doesn't water much, And they've grown about this high and this wide, and they just keep blooming. They can be trimmed. I mean, the book shows them being used as hedges. I haven't grown them enough myself to tell you that. He's got a acreage in the canyons up here, so he doesn't. I don't know that he trims much at all. But he said he really liked the plants, so he ordered a whole bunch of them, and they do grow fast. So that's Galvesia. This one's called Firecracker. The original Galvesias are a little bit more wild looking. This one's a little bit more controlled looking as it grows. And these aren't ready to sell either. They got in a few weeks to root in. One of my favorite natives were low at the moment. This is a native succulent called Lewisia. Native south of the Bay Area. They come in many colors. Someone didn't buy the last two white ones, but they come in white, kind of a pink, kind of a salmon, slightly mauve colors, so a mix of colors. Coral seems to be the most common color. The plants spread out about so wide. They don't need much water at all. You get them in any kind of compost and they rot in a week. It's like they just can't handle. We used to get them from a native plant grower, and we'd lose them within a week of whenever we got them. But once we started growing them in our soil, indestructible, totally indestructible. Water them every day, doesn't hurt them. So these have been in these pots for a couple years. So yeah, but look at the stem on this guy. The stem on it is thicker than my finger, well, as thick as my fingers. So it's been growing. And their flower show is pretty good. Summer, fall flower show. Yeah. About like so. Not much bigger than this. They send out a lot of flowers. A lot of flowers come out of one stem. So, right. I just haven't had a chance to get any of these and start a new crop lately. Maybe this summer we'll start a crop of the other colors. But that's Lewisia. Now we sell a lot of these mimulus also. This is monkey flower. They call it monkey flower because somehow you can see a monkey face in the flowers. I don't know. I haven't been able to see that myself. But these are the jelly bean mimulus. This is jelly bean dark pink, and I think this one's gold. They come in yellow, red, white, and mixed colors. Well, there's different types. Now, both of these have been good in hanging baskets where they grow maybe this tall, maybe this wide, and they'll hang over slightly. So they're used as ground cover, containers. Now, if I get this from any other grower, they'd already be dead. They'd already rot out. They just don't like the compost at all. But we have no problem with them at all at our house. They can take full-on heat, but like last summer I had one on gravel, south-facing yard, and they were getting a little bit stressed looking. So they're probably not at their best, because the book says they can live underneath oak trees, they can live in light shade, part sun to full sun, but I think they like part sun a little better than full sun, or at least not in a real hot situation. They're short-lived, maybe 3 to 5 years, but they bloom pretty much year-round. If you water them. If you water them, they'll keep blooming. If you don't water them, they shut down. Yes.
So those don't need the soil taken off for their seeding.
These we grew in our top pot. If we get them from anyone, they'd already be dead. So. Okay, here's some native penstemon. Penstemon don't seem to be as sensitive to bad dirt. This is Penstemon heterophilus. The famous plant of this species would be Margarita Bop, B-O-P. And I haven't been able to get those. This one's called Blue Springs, but they haven't turned out real pretty. We're not sure what's going on with this selection of them. So we're not going to promote that one too much. But once we get Margarita Bop back in here, but even if we get it from other growers, they seem to do okay. And then this is another native penstemon called Diablo Red. 14 to 16 inches high and maybe twice that wide. Bloom spring and summer. Now the heterophilus ones, like this blue one here, tend to bloom year round. And Margarita BOP tend to bloom year round too. But most penstemons in nature, which are native to North America, primarily throughout North America, bloom spring and summer. And they do seem to be able to handle compost in the ground better. And penstemon are supposed to be good for about 3 to 4 years in one spot. But the original Margarita Bop, the blue one, the company said it was there for like 8 years. And they never watered it, never did anything, but they were in Las Felitas. And that's coastal ranges of California. They probably get 20 to 30 inches of rain in the winter there. So, okay, this is Philadelphia. That's this one. This is Philadelphus mexicana. Actually, this is native to some of the lower hill areas. There's another one we have out there, Lewisii, which is native to Northern California. And I think this is native to Mexico and maybe parts of Arizona and Southern California too. So it may not be a true native. But this one will do well here. Philadelphus are closely related to hydrangea. So use them in the same spots, which can be anywhere from open sunlight to total shade. This one arches out and gets pretty big, and it blooms all along its stems for maybe 3 months of the year with the white, and they're fragrant. The flowers are quite fragrant. They do drop their leaves or go ugly in the winter time. Just like regular hydrangeas, which sometimes they're totally bare in the winter and sometimes they'll keep their foliage, but it's not real pretty. So arching out 4 or 5 foot high, 8, 10 foot wide. Yeah, just be careful because this stem will bloom next year. If you cut it back too far, you won't get as many flowers. So the longer the stems are that you leave, the more bloom you get. Usually you cut the old ones back after they bloom and let the new ones grow. So, yeah, the fragrance is quite nice. This is coffeeberry rhamnus californica. I really haven't done much with these just because they're not real exciting to look at, but they're bushes that can seem to handle the composty soil. Bushes that grow underneath trees, oak trees, about like so. So we've sold quite a few that we buy from our growers for that use underneath oak trees, but I really haven't found them to be very exciting. They're just kind of a native shrub. And then the Metelliha poppy. Botanical name is Rhamnea. Now, if we get them from our growers, this is from one of our growers in compost, they get really ugly this time of year. In our soil, they look a lot better. This one's not quite fully rooted yet. We grew a crop last year, and then all summer long, they just kept getting bigger and bigger. We had to move them up to a 5-gallon bucket because they were reaching 5 foot tall by late summer. So if you're in good soil and you water them, they just keep growing. And they bloom in spring, often between this height and 10 foot. These are all seed grown, so there's quite a bit of variability in color of foliage. They can be greens, blue-green to very steel blue, and the flower size ranges from about 6 inches up to a foot. And we have seen some areas along Ortega Highway that they bloom year-round, but that's by a stream bed that crosses the road. So, yeah, if you keep them wet, they just keep blooming. So these guys have powerful roots, so you be careful. Well, can't help where they grow. So we had one of these at our old store planted in a planter in our parking lot. And it grew okay. It didn't look that great. It did okay. And then 10 feet, more than that, 12 or 15 foot away through the asphalt comes a gorgeous Matilla poppy, and it was prettier than the one that was in our planter, so we just left it. It broke through the asphalt, and just lived there without us irrigating it or anything. Of course, underneath the asphalt, it's usually damp. We've had people tell us they planted one in front of their cabin up in the mountains, and the plant came through their cabin floor inside. So they can be a little invasive that way. Their roots run underground and come up. And they can bloom year-round. The growers' literature, most literature on these said only 1 out of 2 plants makes it, probably because of the compost. Okay, the salvias, or sages, there's a lot of native ones. Now this is the iconic white sage. This is the compact version, which is one of the ones we're growing at the moment. And if you've never encountered white sage, you'll never forget the fragrance that comes off of them. It's just unforgettable. You walk through nature and you smell it, you go, I know where I am. I'm near a white sage country. But the Indians would use it for incense. There's actually some culinary uses of it too. And they say the honey it makes is incredible. So the foliage stays down low and then the flower spikes up. This is our crop of white sage at the moment. They call it Salvia apiana. Apiana means bees, so it's a favorite bee plant. So every year they will grow their foliage about so high and then spike up with the flowers. Yeah, apparently. I have not used it. But and these, if I get them from a grower, they're usually rot out within a few weeks when we get them. So they're very sensitive to compost. This one we switched successfully from compost to not compost to our top pot, and it did really well.
How long does it take that little one to get like that?
Year. Once you get in the ground, they just take off. Yeah. I had one in a smaller pot than that for about 5 years, and it would bloom, but the flowers only come up about so high because it was stressed out. It was such a tiny pot, but it stayed alive. In fact, I think we finally sold it to somebody. So, okay, some other native sages. This is Bee's Bliss. And this one, I believe, is Dara's Choice. So these are native sages, the typical native sage, fuller growth. Oh, the bee's bliss is supposed to stay about knee height foliage, and the flowers come up. Usually they're on these, they're purple or, purple or lavender flowers. And on Dara's Choice, I believe it's a little bit taller. There are some natives that grow about 5 feet high on the foliage and then taller flowers, so they get kind of big. But they're pretty wide, almost totally drought tolerant plants. So they can use up a lot of area in the garden. This is one of the native verbenas, although it's not native to Orange County. They're native to Baja, so that's verbena. Lilacina. And I see them in my neighborhoods. A lot of people use them along in parking strips. They don't get too big, about so big and so wide. Blooms year round. I don't know how long they're supposed to live. I've grown one of the verbenas in the past, and they did really well for about 3-4 years, and they pooped out and died. I think this is longer lived than that, but I am not positive. So, it's 1 foot by 3 to 4 foot, native to Baja. So these we haven't grown this type of verbena. They seem to be not sensitive to compost. Not that sensitive. I mean, they're all better without it, but they're not super sensitive. This is an interesting plant. So this is Prunus ilicifolia. This is Lyonii, which I believe is from Catalina. So most of the Prunus ilicifolias have sharp-edged leaves. This one, let's show on both. This is a smooth-edged leaf, and these have a little teeth on them. So, but I believe this was sold to us as Lyonii, and we put it in our soil. We rescued it and put it in our soil, and it's done real well. So these generally grow 8 to 15 foot. And are used as screens. They kind of grow this form. And they bloom little white, fuzzy white flowers and streamers in the spring. And then, now this will bloom next year. And then they get cherries on them. So this is Catalina cherry. Yes. So if you go to Catalina or go to San Diego Zoo, where they have a lot of these, or along the coastline, they look exactly like European cherries. Same size, same color, but it's all pit. Very little meat on them. So I've eaten these. This is from my neighborhood, and they'll be, full size, 1 inch wide, 1.5 inches wide, and the seed inside is maybe 1/8 of an inch of flesh around the pit. So if somebody does some breeding work with these and gets more flesh on them, then it'd be perfect, a perfect native fruit tree, because they taste like wild cherry, so a little more of the chlorophyll flavor than a regular cherry. The skin is red, the flesh is kind of greenish. But there's a lot of variability. They're all seed grown. Well, this one's cutting grown. But I've grown these from seed myself. We had a nice crop. I sold 12 of them to one homeowner that wanted to make a whole screen along their back wall with them, and they like them. They really like them. They said the Native Americans would make wine out of the flesh, roast the seeds. We don't recommend eating the seeds because all stone fruit seeds contain cyanide. They said if you prepare them a certain way, then it gets rid of most of the cyanide, but I'm not about to do that. So anyway, that's your native Catalina cherry, native on the west coast of California and the Channel Islands. Well, being in the family of peaches, cherries, nectarines, and they only grow about 15 foot, about the same size as the regular peach tree, it's not going to be substantial. Plus, I don't think they live that long either. Peach trees live 25, 30 years. So probably not that different. Okay. I didn't bring all the oaks we have in here because most of them are big. So this is oaks. This one's Quercus berberidifolius. This is scrub oak. It's native to the coastal hills of California, right along the coast. If you've ever been to the area up near Monterey, they've got a whole forest of these miniature trees that are between 6 and 12 foot tall. Beautiful, smooth bark on them. So if you trim them out, they make beautiful little oak trees. Not more than, say, 8 foot tall, 10 foot tall. This one's about 5 years old, maybe 6 years old. We've been growing a few of them. It's like nobody seems to want to buy them. I'm sure as they get older and older, they'll look more and more attractive. But that's your native scrub oak, is the other name for it, scrub oak. We also have island oak. I've got one specimen island oak, which is from the Channel Islands, which is supposed to be the fastest growing of the oaks. I've got one coast live oak, which I grew from a seed up in the canyons. And a friend of mine grew some canyon oaks up from Oak Glen, California. And we weren't certain that they would live down here, but even with this mild winter we just had, they're growing. So they don't need the cold winter up in the canyons to do well. So we do have a few different types of oaks available. So the oaks have a reputation. If you have one that's been growing in the ground and you plant things around and you often kill it, and if you water them a lot, they often die. And we're not certain that that's not due to the fact that if you plant things around them, you kind of damage their roots. So we're not sure what's going on there. Okay, here's this is the giant sequoia. Sequoia dendron. This is the inland from the Sierras. Apparently they grow okay around here because we've been growing this for 3 years now. This was the short one of the group we had. We've sold about 6 others, and the tallest one would be about this tall by now. So now we had carried these as living Christmas trees 20 years ago, and they all died in the summer, but we feel now that it was due to the soil that the grower used on them. If you use better soil, because we had these 2 years ago during that intense hot summer. 2 years ago was hot, and no problem. They came through. They're sitting on black plastic next to a rock walkway, rock road, west side of a hot block wall. In their black plastic containers all summer, no problems. So, of course, in 3,000 years, it's going to be a 300-foot tree. So, be careful where you plant it, or just watch it as it grows. You've got time. They're not speed burners. Okay, and then one native fern we're carrying. They're native ferns, but this is the only one in the trade, is Woodwardia. and they can grow 3 or 4 foot tall, and they slowly spread out. So if you have a shaded area underneath trees, and you keep it somewhat moist, I mean, I don't know that these are native to Orange County at all, but some of the coastal canyons you'll find them. So, and they do get bigger, about so big. They said in the book that under incredibly wet conditions like the Northern California coast, they'll actually reach 8 foot. But most of the other parts of the state, they're only 3 to 4 foot. Okay, any questions on any of these? This one? Well, figure it'll grow this wide and this tall. A lot of ferns, I haven't grown this one enough to tell you, a lot of ferns run around the garden. So you might plant them in one spot and then they start moving around your yard. So this one looks like it can move. It's got several crowns on it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm.